Okay, I think we are 15 seconds into a live stream. So I'm either talking to myself right now, or I'm talking to the lovely LinkedIn audience. But welcome everybody to October's, I nearly said November's then, October's The Contact Center Network. And we've taken a brief hiatus after the last one, which was Chat GPT Part 1. Where we had some familiar faces. Jimmy was one of them. Today we've got some new faces and some old familiar furry faces in the likes of Jimmy Hosang from Mojo CX and the awesome Phil Woodbridge from Nexus Ride. And we're going to be chatting about how and what are the practical applications for things like Chat GPT. And I say Chat GPT because it is one of the more common large language models, but there are various LLMs out there that you can use to drive all sorts of weird and wonderful things in the world of customer service and sales. So we're going to have a bit of a split approach with this. We're going to use the first half of this session talking about customer service, and then we're going to use the second half of the session talking about how we can use Chat GPT and other LLM style models to improve sales growth, sales revenue, and all of those great things. But just to check that I'm not talking to myself, it would be really great to be able to see comments going into the LinkedIn stream. So if you are watching, please do say hello. And drop us a comment into the comment section below. That'll just make me realize and understand that there are people actually watching and listening to this, and I'm not rambling to myself. But either way, if we do ramble to ourselves, it's going to be a great old conversation, Jimmy and Phil, isn't it? So before we start and we go into the session, I'll just let Jimmy and Phil introduce themselves. And as you're a veteran, Jimmy, I'm going to come to you first, and then Phil will follow your lead. So introduce yourself, who you are, and what your interest might be in things like Chat GPT. So over to you, matey.
Cheers, Gary. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jimmy Hosang from Mojo CX, and we're a SaaS company that specializes in conversational guidance and recommendation engines, in next best action for targeted coaching actions and speech analytics. We're really interested in the interplay between those three different things. So designing a great conversation, monitoring a great conversation, and when things go awry, as they generally do, putting it right through a human to human AI assisted journey. And yeah, therein lies the kind of the etymology about why we're interested in AI. We're kind of an AI company at heart. It used to make my toes curl calling ourselves an AI company when most companies weren't doing AI at all. But I suppose we are doing a bit more of that now. And with the advent of OpenAI and GPT 3.5, GPT-4 and onwards, we are definitely getting into the realms of more kind of what we would class as AI, as true AI. And what I'm interested in is how can this be used to, first of all, kind of augment the human to human experience, but then potentially, and I think the newspaper stories are correct, how can we reduce overall demand? And I will just say one more thing is that my view is everybody's so focused on using OpenAI GPT models and other kind of large language models to try and deflect customer demand. They're not really making the best use of all of the capabilities, which I think is automating back office conversations, driving lead gen and reducing administrative workflow. So that's kind of what I'm about.
Brilliant. And only one more thing, Jimmy. That's unusual for you.
Columbo.
But you have touched on a really good point there around back office automation. So we're going to come in. So Phil, over to you. Follow that and let people know who you are, who Nexus Ride is, and what your experience is in this field.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Phil Woodbridge, founder of Nexus Ride. Those of you who follow me on LinkedIn will know that Gary and I work very closely together. I've got a lot to thank Gary for, so I thank you on front of the live audience, Gary. Nexus Ride is a business consultancy and practitioner business. So very much specialising in business optimization, contact strategy, sales strategies, and basically eliminating unnecessary contacts out of customer user journeys. So following on from sort of what Jimmy says, is I have a very strong view on AI, and being fortunate to work with some amazing clients, there's a common trend that people are very nervous of it. Number one, whether they think that's going to replace the jobs, and I can assure you, it should not be used that way. To reiterate on what Jimmy said, it's always, we want to do more for less. It's about cutting cost. But ultimately, it's about internal and external support for your customers and your agents. And what I like to do is bridge that knowledge gap between businesses and AI and really explore how they use it and do the due diligence of where they should be doing it, where they're going to get the best outcomes, and then ultimately how they can use their resource internally better rather than just thinking about that cost element or reduction. How can you be more proactive as a business to get a better reputation, grow furthermore, and get a higher reputation in the market and in your field? So I could carry on talking. I'll leave it short and sweet, Gary, so we can crack on with the questions, to not what people will be interested in.
Absolutely, I think that's a good intro, that Phil. And I think your point there that people are looking for how can we do more for less isn't necessarily translated to how do we get rid of more staff. It's actually thinking about how do we do it more efficiently. And I think that's one of the good things that we're going to be talking about here, is to say, right, how do we bring a different application of Chat GPT and other kind of types of technology and AI to bear to kind of help organizations run more efficiently without necessarily having to lay off loads of people, so that they can serve more customers in different ways. So that leads me to the first part. And what I would like to say with all of this is I've got some questions prepared, because that's what good webinar hosts do. But not everybody wants to hear my questions, and this might not be good news for Phil and Jimmy, because it means I'm putting the clipboard down and we've got all sorts of questions coming in left field. But what we do want to hear is what questions have you guys got around the application of things like Chat GPT, etc., in sales and or customer service. Are you using it currently? If so, how are you using it? If you are considering using it and you want some thoughts and you want to kind of put some questions to the panel, that's a brilliant opportunity to kind of share best practice and share with the community, because guaranteed other people are going to be thinking the same things, and multiple voices and multiple brains can help do a little bit of thinking and get you some answers. So if you do have a question or if you do have any thoughts, please drop it into the chat. I will find it, I will share it on the screen, and we'll ask the panel. But the first question that I've got for the panel for today is around customer service. And I'm going to start this one with you, Jimmy, and think about how has Chat GPT transformed the customer landscape, particularly in terms of how it's providing quick and more accurate responses to customer inquiries?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually. So I think one of the bits that I was kind of moaning about earlier, the advent of like Chat GPT and the maniacal obsession of every ops director to get an AI driven chatbot in. It has yielded some really interesting initial findings. So what we're seeing a lot more is clients attempting to push customers into AI as a first point of call. So you've got more AI-driven IVRs that are being tested at the moment, or utilizing omni-channel CCaaS platforms to put the AI like at the front of a conversation. So we're seeing that with like the chatbots on a website or in-app experiences, and using the AI initially to effectively like route the call to the most appropriate person, or where possible deal with it. So that's relatively traditional, but the way in which it's being applied is quite interesting. So if I'm maybe less of the practitioner and more of the technical expert, which pretty dangerous. How it used to work is effectively you build like massive decision trees when it comes to the chatbot, and effectively it's an if this then that. It's not really AI. What we are seeing is some really interesting things where using a specific data structure, which I'll just tell you what it is. It's called a vector database. Using vector databases, you can effectively kind of scrape information from different sources. So you can scrape information from your knowledge base. You can bring in your existing scripts in Word format or PDF format. You can bring in all sorts of unstructured data and semi-structured data into a database, and you can query off the back of it. What that means is that contextually, the conversation doesn't have to be an if this then that. It's almost a bit more like a what would you call it? Like a cloud, like a network diagram of lots of different contexts and responses. And that's what people are trialing right now in order to have kind of a conversation. Just moving on from that, just quickly though. So while that's good in terms of a deflection point of view, we are starting to see some early learnings around why it can potentially be an absolute nightmare. And one of the reasons of that is, first of all, it's an AI at the moment using maybe, let's say, 6-month-old technology will hallucinate. They call it hallucination, but it'll start just making things up off the spot. Advent of OpenAI has obviously shown us that we thought it would do automated things really well, but actually it does really creative things really well. And one of those creative things that it does is just outright lie. so that's one of the kind of the dangers with it. But to solve that, and just to give everybody a bit of an idea about how you can improve it, you can just do more advanced kind of prompt engineering. So rather than just saying that this AI can just answer any question, you can give it structure, and that's kind of called like LangChain technology and stuff like that. But also as well, we've seen from an IVR perspective some really good demand deflection. However, there's not the same rapport or tempo that's built over an AI conversation than a human to human. And I think that's the real thing that everybody's going to have to kind of overcome over the next 3 years if we're going to make customer experience and customer service great in this regard.
You know what? That's a lot of information to take in about 2 minutes, that Jimmy, but really useful stuff. And I think it's, I mean, for me there, when I listen to what you're saying, it's almost, you're providing the blueprint of a conversation that an open AI engine can turn into almost like a virtual conversation that will give you the illusion almost of having a real life conversation with maybe a little bit less empathy and rapport built around it. And I think that's maybe where people expect AI to go, and expect the use of all of the great things that OpenAI brings and transcription brings and speech analytics brings. And I think the danger in that is what you've said there, is that people make things up, or the information gets relayed in the wrong way, and the quality suffers. So I'm going to put a pin in that for a second, because we are going to be talking about quality, risk assurance, and operational improvements in the next one. But we might come back to how we start to mitigate some of that risk in one of the later questions. Phil, from your perspective, and I know you're not as much entrenched in the data architecture and the tech as Jimmy, but from a practical sense, from what your customers are asking for, that you're seeing in the customer service landscape, and that things that you're helping your clients with, what are the types of things that you're seeing?
So I think first and foremost, it's educating them on what AI does. I think there's a stigma around it at the moment because of historical people that have used AI and chatbots that have purely been used from a deflection perspective that would actually prevent someone from speaking to an end user. And that stigma stayed with it, where it has advanced massively over the last sort of 12 months. I think Chat GPT is the most downloaded platform when you look at like your Facebook, your Twitter, and so on. So it speaks volumes. But I think for me, first and foremost, any decision that you make in a business has to be driven by data. And I think what the AI enables us to do is collect and analyze that data in a more structured way. So based on that data, following on from what Jimmy was talking and alluding to, you can then use that to do workflows, look at where the customers are contacting, why are they contacting you, and then you can use AI then to plug into your internal knowledge bases. You can go into CRM systems and you can specifically create workflows that will feed that information back to the customer using AI. So at that stage, I personally don't think there is that much detriment to the customer experience, because I've implemented projects like this, and on the back of it, seen 25% in customer satisfaction scores and repeat customers. Because if you put yourself in a customer's position, if you can do something yourself and not have to wait in a queue or ring, what would you rather do? And I guess that's a question for anyone listening today. If you could go and get the answer immediately through an AI solution on a simple query, I know I'd much rather do that. So the first one for me is it gives you data that enables you to come up with the right strategic goals, projects, or workflows that you should be doing from a customer experience perspective. Then as a business, with that data, you can then access all these different options that you choose to do within time and master the foundations to begin with. But first and foremost, you can look at an operating model going from 5 days a week, 9 till 5, to 24/7 availability. It'll give you quicker response times. It'll enable you to handle queries and then be able to skill-based route to those people internally that might have that skill set to deal with that customer query. So from the flip side, if you're an internal agent, and AI can get all the data needed to prep you to have that interaction with the customer that we've not previously had. So they'll know that Jimmy's contacting us today. He's contacting for this reason. He's already completed his DPA, so that's been checked and done. The information has already popped up on the CRM because the AI has fed that in from the customer email address or reference number, and then that operator is ready to go through the call and create a better customer experience. So for me, the benefits are endless on that scenario. Efficiency.
And you know what? I think you've mentioned a few really positive things there, and I think we talk about OpenAI, we talk about AI, we talk about Chat GPT, and we talk about how it can help optimize the speed of delivery to a customer query and help us self-serve. But the knock-on impacts of that in the wider context of contact centers is it has massive improvements in speed to competency, it has massive improvements in customer experience, it has massive improvements in managing demand and deflecting that demand, which all impacts that customer experience, all impacts that customer satisfaction. So I think for those that might be on the periphery of this, saying that OpenAI is a bad thing and ChatGPT is a bad thing and steer clear, I think the upside operationally is significant just as much as the actual experience for an agent and or a customer. Jimmy, coming to you from your perspective, and I think what I'm interested to hear for this one, and it kind of, I suppose it broadens itself to some of the stuff that you talked about earlier, in more of the complexity of conversation. I'm keen to think and get your experience as to how you think things like Chat GPT can help with escalating complex customer issues to human agents whilst maintaining a smooth transition in that conversation. And do you think there is a benefit or a detriment in having that there for those more complex conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a leading question, but yeah, I do actually think I do think it, because you mentioned something earlier, and I actually disagree, which I disagreed with, which is I think AI struggles with tempo and kind of multi-threading a conversation where, in our prep call, everyone's bouncing off each other. You're kind of coming in at different points, and how can an AI multi-thread and build that rapport? I think that's what it struggles with. However, what we've been able to see is it's actually miles better at delivering empathetic messages, because what is empathy to me is different to empathy to you, is different empathy to Phil, and empathy to if anyone's watching, empathy to those people. And that definition is very, very difficult, and the consistency of the delivery of that definition is very different. As such, like when you're going through a conversation, an AI's kind of ability to understand if a customer's got some financial vulnerabilities, or if they have negative sentiment and they need to just be told, I understand where you're coming from, just very simple, and deliver that message, or apologizing. We see like, so it sounds stupid, but we're running speech analytics with real-time prompts just to tell agents to apologize because something's turned up late, or they've messed something up. And an AI's ability to identify those is just far greater. And it's because it understands kind of contextually all of the different things that the customer's saying and the nature of the call and the dynamics of the call fast in real time, which an agent isn't always doing. Like I've been a contact center agent. A lot of the time you spend your day in autopilot. You just got a set way of doing things. I tell the same joke over and over again. And so you need an ability to snap the agent out of autopilot and go, no, this is a vulnerable customer. We need to change tact. We can't just go down this path, or apologize for this not going particularly well and say that you're going to escalate it. And so, to answer your question, I actually think AI has got a greater ability to identify behavioral challenges on both the agent and the customer side, which enables a conversation to be flipped from something that would maybe escalate to a negative ending into something that either gets the job done or flips it into a positive.
Yeah, and you know what? It's the application for it is significant. I think you do get that in agent life, don't you? Where you become a little bit immune to it after repeatedly going through difficult conversation after difficult conversation after difficult conversation. You can become a little bit, I suppose, hardened. Yeah, and you kind of lose that sentiment. So actually, how do you envisage that's being brought in then? So we've talked about it being difficult to train AI to be empathetic and build rapport. So with that in mind, how are you seeing that? Is it in sentiment? Is it in analysis? Is it training? How is that being applied in the real world?
So how I see it is like how I see the application is, so AI, what we know as AI, like Chat GPT interfaces, so first of all, it's a stochastic model. It's a bell curve. So you can ask an AI a question and it can give you a shit answer. I'm allowed to swear. I have done now.
Well, you have done now. Forgiveness rather than permission.
It has a variability to it just naturally, but because of the data points that it's analyzing, can't quite remember off the top of my head, but it's like billions of data points it's analyzing in however many different dimensions. It's enabled to triangulate like a response to a question just far better and more consistently. A couple of things though. The first thing I think is it's about Mr. Miyagi. It's Mr. Miyagi, an agent. So reminding an agent over and over again, like this is an empathetic second line to a customer saying something's been late or I've not received my refund. It's about apologizing. It's about training your agents over and over and over again. However, in the back end, if you're building your AIs like competently, you can then use the outputs of that to then feed back into the model to make it more accurate. So your average for your AI, which is doing your prompts, starts off being maybe slightly above average, and we can see that in the research papers that they're doing around how it responds to questions for the bar and stuff. It's maybe like slightly above average. But if you're feeding back the results of great conversations and great outcomes back into the model, what that actually then does is it makes the AI like more accurate. And I think that is, I do think that we shouldn't say that this isn't going to automate some jobs and things like that, but especially when it comes to kind of regulatory and stuff and vulnerability and stuff like that, being able to better identify those types of things and course correct and continuously improve that, I think is just a betterment for every consumer.
Yeah, and I think Keith Stapleton's made a good point in the chat to say if agents need to be guided around empathy and sentiment, there are issues beyond introducing a system. So I think having to remind your agents to show empathy.
Let me respond to no, but I'll respond to Keith. But it's again, is your bell curve of agents better than your AI bell curve? That's the issue. It's like you might have trained up all of your agents, and you might have done as much training as you can, but you've still got bad agents and who can't detect empathy, and you've still got good. You've still got agents who are way up on the spectrum, a bit like me, who like, and you've still got people who are very, very empathetic. Because especially in a large contact center, you can't have you just won't have everybody who's like dynamite. I think that's the issue, is how can you Mr. Miyagi them to at least all achieve like a hygiene level?
Yeah,
I think it's to do with knowledge as well, Jimmy, personally. So I think when I was in the call centers and you see people in there, they're doing that job day in, day out. So they've got a higher knowledge of the product or the service they're doing. And sometimes in conversations, they would assume that the customer should know that. So there does naturally appear to be a lack of empathy. And not only that, you could have different tenure of agents where they might have a different way of answering a question, which then leads to further sort of contact or misguidance. And what the AI can do is be a single source of truth based on the content that you put into that AI. So again, following on from what Jimmy said, if you're looking at FCA regulated companies, or you've got high compliance or scripting, you can build that into the AI and feed it into scripts to make sure that people are following that. So it protects your security and your quality governance as well. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges myself. I think it's operators with a high knowledge expect customers to have the same.
And Phil, you must see this as well. From a tenure perspective, what you have is you've got low tenure, you've got CX and HT and control and everything. As an agent gains more tenure, they continuously improve up to maybe like 6 months. But then once you get past a year, actually it gets worse. And it's not agents. This happens with doctors, it happens with pilots, it happens with everybody, which is you get complacent. And so the key study is GPs that have got 10 years experience are worse than newly qualified GPs. Yeah. Because they just think they know it all. And so you've seen contact center agents who
I mean, the next wave is, can Chat GPT replace a GP? There's a whole new webinar. We'll see about that one.
Already has. Like my GP Google stuff. I'm just like, come on, lad.
Phil, I want to come to you for a final question just before we move into the sales conversation. And this one, I suppose, is you've talked about customer satisfaction already, and how that can boost loyalty and improve customer experience. So can you share any examples of how AI and things like Chat GPT have contributed to that improvement in customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, and maybe what are the metrics or feedback mechanisms that we've employed to kind of measure the impact of that?
Yeah, of course. So I think it goes back to what I said at the start, Gary. I mean, if you're a customer and unfortunately you're contacting a business on the back of a challenge or an issue, or just being unsatisfied in general, if you're then having to contact and you're under pressure, you're waiting and you get through to someone, they might not necessarily know the answer, so it needs to be escalated. Then you're waiting again. You have to wait for a team leader. They haven't got the authority levels. So straight away then, if we take an example like that, you kind of, the customer's already lost. They're not going to come and use the services again. Where what AI can do is it can detect straight away at the start of the call, whether it's through a chatbot pre-screen form or whether it's through a voice IVR, you can capture the reason why a customer is calling immediately. As I've said, you can DPA them, make sure that's all confirmed. And if at any point, by the way, none of this works, you just divert straight to an operator. It's not as if we're saying you bypass them, they're not available to help. You can bypass all that and go straight to speak to an internal person. But from that information, then what you can do is you can feed the right article, whether that's built in a knowledge base or an FAQ section on your website or a help center. You can use video tutorials for your most reasons for contact that might be a complaint. And you can feed that information through AI direct to that customer and give them access to that. So I'm not saying it's something that you can switch on overnight. There's a lot of data that you would need to analyze to get to that point, and then you'd have to work collaboratively with the internal departments, then to build the right content and understand what works for what customers, what demographic of customer, whether it's an article or whether it's a video. But on the back of all that, a customer could come online, speak to someone on an IVR or a chat bot, say what it is they want, and get an instant response and get their query resolved there and then. You are going to be more satisfied with that type of journey than going through escalation points. So on the back of completing projects like this on the past, where we have looked at 12 months worth of data, we've looked at the top 10 reasons for contact, and out of that, we established that 5 of them actually could be self-served by the customer through their portal on the website. So they were built, they were created using workflows, and that was done. Then the other half, we established that could be done through coming into the bot and taking the information from the CRM and giving them an update. And top level results, and I'm not talking this was over a 12, 18-month period, within pretty much 3 months, we saw deflection rates of 30%, which enabled us to be more proactive with the operation in driving sales. And that sales team then resulted in 1.5 million annual revenue, incremental at no extra cost, sales through service. We saw 55% self-serve rate. And I think the magic one out of all this was 25% uplift in customer satisfaction scores.
Yeah. Says a lot, doesn't it? And I think sometimes when people are listening to this, they're thinking, actually, all this doesn't apply to me in my world or in my center. And people think, all right, a contact center might be like 100, 200, 300, 400 seats, and actually none of this is relevant. But how does this relate to your, I suppose, your small to medium enterprises? Do you have to be a big organization to benefit from this, or do you think this can be applied on a smaller scale?
No, not at all. So again, Gary, you and I have spoke about this. I still think, and I've spoke openly about it on LinkedIn, I still think there's a stigma around contact centers. I mean, Steve Bartley did that video saying where he came from, and we've all started off in the contact centers and look at our careers now, and I'm proud of that, but there's still certainly a stigma there. So when you talk contact center, people assume you're talking 50 to 100 seats, like you say. Any form of customer interaction where you're speaking to customers on a phone, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, that is technically a contact center. So when you talk about size, Gary, it can be applied to any size model. It's all about reviewing your data and business objective and values to decide on what the right journey should be, not just doing it for a cost-saving exercise, because if you do that, that's when you'll end up in trouble.
And you know what? There's a really good question, Jimmy, that I think I'm going to share on the screen. And I quite like sharing these because it makes me feel like I'm a bit techie, but it's StreamYard, so it makes it really easy for you. And it links back to what Phil was saying there about how do you get the ROI and how do you make sure that you're focusing on the right things. So it's from John Dawson. He's saying the ROI in the Chat GPT is the area of customers need to understand, how much can Chat GPT make more efficient based on the cost of service? So how much can it manage and help with both customers and us based on the cost of the service? So thinking about the ROI of things like this then, Jimmy, from your perspective, because I know you've worked with a number of clients to kind of build that in, how are businesses seeing the ROI and what can they expect to see as an ROI from implementing tools like this?
So just an interesting question. Like, do you know what the true cost of every conversation going through Chat GPT would be if it was a single person? So say a single agent with normal working hours, 100 productive hours, 80 hours of talk time. How much for every response and every bit of analysis to go through? Has anyone
I feel like this is a psychometric test question for
It is a
a
psychometric
director of operations role.
I'll tell you what it is. Too much, right? Too much, right? So, I don't know, Phil. Do you have a feel?
Yeah, no, I'll help you with it. So basically, John, I've just done something very similar. Now it's a potential ROI, and I must say that. But whenever I've sort of built ROIs based on using Chat GPT and AI to support with customer sort of operations, the first thing that you would need to establish is what the cost of a contact is. So whether that's chat, whether it's email, whether it's a phone call. And again, you can do that by looking at your contacts per hour, what the salary of an operator is divided by their hours, and you can find out what the cost of that contact is. Once you've pulled your data of, let's call it 6 months worth of contact reasons, you would go through that and you realistically look at the ones in which you could feed data using AI back to your customer. So, for example, if someone's contacting you to find out what their outstanding balance is, you can pretty much guarantee that you can deflect that and let the customer get that information, because they'll ask the question whether on chat or an IVR, it'll go instantly into the language model, AI, and it'll feed back from the CRM, because that's where you store all your data. It might not even be a CRM, it might be an internal database that you have. So then you would apply that same method to all of those contact reasons. And then that, in theory, would tell you, well, based on all those records and looking at the ones I could deflect, what percentage of them are the ones that could be self-served or could be dealt with by AI. Now, I would never go in at 100% deflection or AI resolve query. I'd always be sort of reserved and going at a 10, 20% of that 100%. So I think that out of all these potential queries, we can deflect 20% of them. And then you'd look at the contacts and apply that cost next to it. And that is very, very top level ROI. I've not even started talking about efficiency savings, the reduced handling times through being able to complete IDV and so on. But if it's something that anyone would like to pick up separately and reach out about, we're more than happy to run through any questions such as that, because I'm just conscious of time, Gary.
So sorry, so cheers for that, Phil. So it's interesting. So I completely agree with Phil's kind of methodology. It was a bit of a trick question, because I don't think we have to do all of the calculations. And one of the calculations that we've done is, like, on average, there's 25 customer responses and 25 agent responses for a conversation. And when we're analyzing, we've got to analyze what the agent says, and then we've got to push responses back. Then we've got to analyze that response backwards and forwards. When we did a full calculation, which was if we did pure agent assist on OpenAI, Chat GPT 3.5, it costs us about £600 a month per user per month. Now we work. If you work that back up, that's £7,500 a year. That's nothing to do with your transcription costs and stuff like that. Which means that actually, and I might be saying something controversial here because I'm not on top of my rate per hour. Actually, you could probably get a human in the Philippines to deliver service at that kind of rate, or maybe kind of Mexico and places like that. So I think, as Phil said, using it for those really specific use cases on really specific contacts drives a really positive ROI. But this is the reason why me and Phil were talking about why we're just talking about Chat GPT, because OpenAI is 20 times more expensive than other variations of it. Now, GPT 3.5 and GPT-4, and you've got 5 coming out. Excellent. Really, it gives you the best results probably, but they're 20 times more expensive than other providers or self-build large language models. And actually, it's the whole scale ROI that you need to get to. So everybody is rushing to build Azure instances and use OpenAI for business and stuff like that. But the reality is, for a lot of human assist or long run conversations and complexity, it's super expensive, and these ways and means of reducing that cost by about 20 times by using different approaches.
So I think what I'm hearing is, if people want to have some help in building the business case for the ROI of AI and ChatGPT, just hit you up on LinkedIn. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. So I do want to go into the sales side of things, because I think they're both. I mean, you said it earlier, Phil. You said sales through service. So I think there's a very close link to how AI can impact sales and sales performance and sales growth. And I've got just a few questions around that, and I'm going to start with this one towards you, Phil, in terms of what ways have you seen things like Chat GPT improve the efficiency of sales teams, potentially in handling more routine tasks or more of the end-to-end sales process?
Okay, so again, I'm just going to give realistic examples of what I've seen. And I think when you talk about sales, Gary, when you speak to a lot of businesses, when they want to uplift, which we're in difficult times at the moment, businesses are having a lot of pressures put on them. The first thing they try and do is say we need to increase sales. And what they'll do, they'll go and spend a shed load of money on marketing. They'll think they need to acquire new businesses, and that's at the neglect of their existing customers. You're more likely to sell to a existing customer than you are to a new customer, and it's the cheapest way of doing it. So the way in which I've seen AI and Chat GPT support with that is, again, capturing the information of the customer. And we're talking more from an internal interface at the moment, and it's giving prompts and updates on customer accounts and propensity to buy to that agent, so that they can tailor their conversation on what their availability would buy to buy a certain product, or what they'd be more likely to go for at a certain date. And it can do triggers of when to contact, when they should be following up. So what you've seen on the back of it, from that side of it, is a more structured and relevant conversation with the customer, with the prompts to tell the agents of what to say and do, which is resulting in sort of 10-15% conversion rates. But then on the flip side, sorry, Gary, no time, but on the flip side, as I said about the capacity, the sales through the service, is rather than reacting, is when you create that capacity, is being proactive to those customers. And if you're in a business that can do upsell with different products lines, it's then being more strategic with account management to upsell.
Yep.
Which again, you're finding it easy to sell that way as well.
And I think you've touched on a really good point there around propensity modeling and building out predictive analytics, and then using Chat GPT and other models to almost trigger and fire either emails or intent to customers who've got that opportunity and who are in that position to buy. And I know, Jimmy, a lot of what Mojo CX does is around that predictive analytics side of things. How are you seeing the application of these types of models in the sales world? And are you seeing that increase, or is it an area of exploration?
Yeah, like, first of all, like, me and Phil don't go way back, don't really know each other, but he's absolutely right. Like, start selling to your actual audience. Stop ignoring them or just seeing them as somebody you don't want to talk to, like, and trying to, like, onboard new people. Like, the best growth area for customer lifetime value is on your existing base. So yeah, I'm like super passionate about that. And you know more about them. So I think just starting with something super simple, which everybody should be doing from today, and this includes service and it includes sales, but both of them. And Phil alluded to it. You can transcribe your calls now and put auto summarization over the top of that call. That auto summarization will absolutely kill your rap, and it will give you what the customer's buying intents are. It will give you kind of the propensity to buy all sorts of different things. It will schedule ringbacks back in your CRM for you. It will automatically summarize your call. And the amount of time that it takes, that 30 to 40 seconds of writing all that down and putting it into Salesforce or putting it into HubSpot or whatever, you can just use that to speak to your next customer and conduct the next sale. And that over time, if we talk about, Sorry about the kind of the bullshit methodology stuff, but incremental gains. If you do that for every single one of your agents over time, it's a huge cost saving. We're talking to we've got a 2,000 seat, we've got two 2,000 seat contact centers that we're working with at the moment, and literally day one of project, we're removing 10% of workload with auto summarization. 10%, and that's not 12-month benefits case or 5-year benefits case. It's the planning director. How long do you spend typing in your notes and putting them in? Well, just physically, like going to the page and typing it up takes time. You've got 40 seconds of wrap, right? Well, we'll go down to 25 seconds or 30 seconds. And what that allows you to then do is it allows you to speak to more, just naturally speak to more customers, which means you're having, well, theoretically, I'll just use the easy maths, but you're having 10% more conversations, sales conversations, which increases your sales. So it has a multiplicative effect. It's saving on your cost base, and you're getting more sales off the back of it.
I think there's two things there. I think the fact that you've used the word multiplicative really seamlessly was a really good one.
Don't use any big words.
But I'm also seeing that Phil is itching to come in and add to the conversation. So I'm going to bring Phil in from your perspective and talk about maybe where you're seeing some enhancements in sales performance as a result.
I just think, again, this one went right over me. I think it's only when Jimmy started talking then. I think one thing that I haven't mentioned, and one thing that is really beneficial is with AI and chatbot functionality or omnichannel solutions, you can operate at a 24/7 model. Yes, there is always going to be that risk of if someone comes on out of hours and you haven't got it manned by a person, they might not be able to speak to someone. But again, in a recent project that I've done, we did some Google analytics, looked at when people were visiting the website, and we could see that people were coming on out of hours with sales queries. Now, the business didn't want to take the risk of employing a staff and just ultimately not converting any sales. So what we did, we took the chatbot and applied a nice simple workflow with capturing the customer name, why they were contacting, what they were interested in, and if they were interested in what a call back from a person, what would be the best date and time. That then AI would then take that information and schedule it in the agent's diary to call that person back as a warm lead. And the business case behind that was that they were losing out on 15K of organic revenue a week.
Crazy.
Honestly, it's. I mean,
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? It's how do you expand your business? How do you increase your market share? How do you increase your global footprint? And when you look at a chatbot that never sleeps or a virtual agent that never sleeps, and the opportunities that are coming in that you're not necessarily getting round to, or that have gone cold because you're not working in the right time zone, then that's I mean, that speaks for itself. Jimmy, you were going to add to that?
Yeah, it's just, but this is like, you know, Phil's probably like way more on the practitioner level than me, and I'm doing a bit more on this kind of technology side. But this isn't like science fiction. This is like week one, day one. It's like day one, week one. There's all sorts of tech vendors selling all sorts of kind of snake oil around AI and the cost of doing all these sorts of projects, where there's very, very simple, practical stuff that you can do kind of today. And you could, for the cost of the natural language processing or the databases and Phil's consultancy and stuff like that, to just get it back. But the cost of it, no, but it can be, you can have it like next month, and it can start seeing benefits.
I think there's another aspect that I want to look at with sales, and it makes me think: is cold calling dead, or is prospecting dead? And is a real life agent's role in lead generation now being supplanted by potential applications for virtual agents who can do your qualification and do your lead generation for you? What's your experience? And I'll start with you, Phil, and then we'll come into yourself, Jimmy, for your thoughts. What's your experience, Phil, in how AI and large language models are being used as a means to speak to customers without necessarily having to have a real life agent sat behind the telephone doing your lead generation and your lead qualification?
It's a really good question. And I think for me, this will cause a lot of opinions, this, and potential conflict. But for me, I mean, funnily enough, I've had this conversation this morning with one of my clients up in the Northeast. And the talk was, we want to get more sales, but we've got a head of sales that's trying to generate their own leads. Is it a waste of time? Is it a waste of resource? Could that resource be better utilised elsewhere? And what we're mapping out at the minute, and we've got enough evidence to back this up, is looking at using AI on the website. Now, to really drive that, though, there are other things you'd look at, such as SEO strategies, PPC strategies. So it all links in with that as well. But then the AI then to really capture the information needed for that salesperson to go and do the face-to-face meeting, the Zoom meeting, and prep them with enough information to go and close and convert. And I have seen that in other places. So it's not about replacing people of doing lead gen and not saying that it's not needed, but could you enhance that volume and get more data, because it is all about the data, to then give that to a salesperson to really then go and be more personal when it comes to the closing stage. So I think, in my opinion, Gary, I think that we're not fully there on it yet, where AI can do all the vetting and do the lead gen, but I do think it is on the horizon. And
I know, Jimmy, you are going to have some thoughts, so I'm going to come to you and ask you to expand on it. But what's your view? Are we there yet, or is there more to do?
So, I think
I love how your camera is like reacting to your bodily movement.
As well. What would I say? I think of sales as very much like being an airline pilot in the 1950s right now. So that was, and over time, becoming an airline pilot is equally as important, because you've got so many lives to look after. But all of the machinery and the technology, the capability and the guide rails and everything around you, it enables you to take that plane off and land it in the correct place. And I see that very much like where we're going from a sales space right like today. So it's already become, over the last like 10, 15 years, way more metric driven and process driven and things, rather than the kind of the Mad Men model kind of stuff. But I actually think it's more around the automation of meeting bookings, signing documents, scanning documents, and all that type of stuff, and reducing the operational overhead of a sale. That's the most important part. And again, it goes back to reduce the operational overhead in a contact center for a service agent, and then focus on the human to human conversation. I find it the same with sales. So pre-qualification and leads, analysis of that, totally understand. But when you then do human, you want to qualify a lead and do that first conversation, that's your first impression of your company. I see loads of people trying to automate it, whereas actually I'd prefer to focus on that element of it and have somebody else automate all of my proposals and do all the automated booking meeting and keep people warm in an automated manner via email campaigns, rather than thinking, oh, we've got a huge list of things that we need to qualify. How can I automate that? Yeah. It's like I said, for the customer service bit, it's asked about it. It's the wrong way around. Yeah. Get rid of your overhead. So
that's
AI.
the second swear word. Thanks, Jimmy.
Sorry. You got to get 18 plus rated.
Yeah. I've just brought this. I've brought this on the screen just for I jump in there, Phil. It's just because I think it's relative to what you were just saying there, Jimmy. Is that the essence of the sales role is to build that trust, to build that empathy, to build that relationship with somebody. So actually, how can AI influence all the other bits up to that? It still requires the human element to build trust. So to what you were saying there around looking at the sales overheads and looking at the sales admin, it's about driving the efficient information and driving the efficiencies within the sales process, but still keeping that sales relationship relevant at the same time. So I thought it was just a useful one to show.
Can I just give one little bit there, which is
You
just
can,
really
and then I'm going to come back to Phil. Go on.
I'll be very quick though. Like we've just closed the sale with a company today. Yesterday. We've got contract to sign. I've got statement of work to complete when it comes to that. And so I'm here like doing LinkedIn Live and things like that, and I'm thinking, oh, I've got to do these two things. With the efficient use of AI, we could have had that conversation. We could have read in all of the documents, and it could be automatically generating all of that paperwork for me in the background. And that's actually what it's really, really good at. So it's that type of thing that I think is really important, that keeps you in the human to human, like at the front and center.
Definitely. Phil, I know you had a couple of extra points to raise on that, so we'll round off with you.
Yeah, it was just the fact that we were sort of pretty much tagging that at new sales, but what is sales? Sales is increased volume, increased revenue. So I think you've got to consider sort of retention. If you improve your retention rate, it's a sale. If you then upsell your customers, it's a sale. And that's where AI is extremely powerful. As Jimmy was saying, in automating processes, you could build contact strategies of when to reach out to a customer if they're not using the products as much, looking at their usage. You can look at when they're coming up for renewal, potentially, if it's a subscription, and making sure that you're getting it at the right time to save that sale. So I don't think it's all just around new wins. I think your big benefits on your back end and automation as well is when you're looking at your existing customers.
I mean, customer retention, customer growth, customer loyalty. I think we've got a whole section there that we could look at, is to say, how do we apply AI models to contact strategies, and how do we start to segment customers down and then talk to them in different ways using AI as a tool and as a mechanism to kind of build that loyalty and aid that retention. So I think that's it's another very good point, and I think there's multiple different webinars that we could do here. So this is why I love talking about this topic. We've got 3 minutes left. I'm just going to come to each of you for your final thoughts on the future of Chat GPT for sales and service, and just round off where you think where are we heading, and what's next. And I'm going to start with you, Jimmy, because I know you're always opinionated, and you'll have something that comes straight to mind. So what's the future of Chat GPT when it comes to sales and service?
Yeah, I think the future of GPT like models will eventually become like pure voice AI that's dealing with sales and service. It will be a natural progression. I just think that, as I've said before, there is just a natural challenge at the moment around how much information can it hold in its head, when does it know how to interrupt a person, how does it build rapport and things, and it's still got years to go to get to that place. As such, I think that the near-term advantages that it has is around getting rid of needless tasks and needless tasks and needless parts of conversation, optimizing conversations and helping agents kind of focus on what's important, and then taking the tasks away, things like auto summarization and auto scheduling and things like that. And then in this middle ground, we've just got a very interesting middle ground of different things that are happening. My view is that we should be looking to reduce operational overheads and sales overheads through the use of AI, which means that we can consistently keep the human part of the conversation there, because the human to human, because I still think that that's valuable to drive sales service retention outcomes. And I think there's a little bit further off before everything gets automated, where I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the likes of Salesforce, Pega, CRMs, I think those are the guys that are most in danger with this kind of technology, as an AI can go and put data into a database, quicker than a human can go to Salesforce and update it. So I think that's kind of the journey before we get to full AI automation.
And I think your immediate point there is how do we reduce the cost to serve and how do we reduce the cost of sale? And actually that as a bottom line on your contact center or in any business is advantageous. So I think that's a really good point. Well made. Phil, final 60 seconds to yourself. What's the future of it in your view?
So I've been lucky enough recently to attend a couple of networking events and looking at how AI is now being applied to voice. It took me back to a point where it scared me. I've seen live a conversation end to end happen where it was done by voice AI. So I think the future is looking very, very positive with it. There's still, I agree with all Jimmy's points around sort of the understanding and capabilities of it. But I think you're going to see more companies use it. But my advice would be, if there's any reservations, try it internally. It's not just a customer-facing tool. Start off internally with your staff for training, speed to competency, knowledge-based articles, and try it that way, because I think bridging the gap and getting consistency, for me, it's all about eliminating waste, stopping repeat contacts, and giving the best customer journey that you can do. I could carry on, Gary, but
love those lean principles. Let's eliminate that waste. Love it. I think that's been a really, really interesting conversation, and I don't just say that because I've been part of it. I say it because I find it fascinating. And I think the topics that we go through and the stuff that we bring to this forum is always really interesting. And the chat has been ablaze with thoughts and topics, which again is really, really useful stuff. So if you're watching this back, go and check out the comments. There's some really interesting stuff and some really interesting points well made. We are running the next one on the 23rd of November, 1 till 2 p.m. on LinkedIn Live. We've got you back again, Jimmy. I don't know what I've done in a past life to have you as close as you are, but you provide a really interesting perspective. And we'll be inviting people in from the QA industry. So we're looking at QA, risk and compliance, and operational improvement. So some of the stuff that we've talked about here, we will delve a little bit deeper. And I know there's been some questions in the chat about QA. So we'll please do tune in if you're looking to optimize and improve and make your QA process that little bit smarter. But the last thing for me remains to be said is thank you to Phil and thank you to Jimmy. You've been perfect panelists, really interesting and humorous at points as well. So makes the viewing pleasure go a little bit quicker. But yeah, thank you very much. And hopefully we will see everybody at the same time on the 23rd of November, 1 till 2 p.m. on LinkedIn Live. I'll let Phil and Jimmy stay, but everybody else, thank you very much. I am ending the stream.